Hello, everyone. It is, what's the day here? Friday, the 24th of July, and I'm about ready to begin our consideration of handout number two, the origin of money theory. And so we've talked about interest rates, and we've talked about the quantity theory of money. And now we want to step back a little bit and give ourselves a good foundation for what money is. And you'll see that it's just not like if you look at various types of candy and you see another type of candy, you run onto that and blah, 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 and it's not of interest to you. Nothing of a special note to take. But with money, one has to take special note to really get a strong grasp of what it is and what it can do. So we're going to look at the origin of money theory given to us by a very, very famous economist, Carl Menger. He founded the Austrian School of Thought, and he was one of three individuals who, independent of one another, discovered or formulated the law of decreasing marginal utility. This was back in 1870, 1871. And with the beginnings of marginality, we have the beginnings of modern economic science. Yes, there was the classical school before and the mercantile school and all that of thought, but we think that with marginal analysis, we have come a long way in a scientific sense compared to earlier times. So the other two formulators of the law of decreasing marginal utility were, I believe he's a Frenchman, Leon Walras. He may have been a Swiss citizen. He was a founder of the Lausanne School of Economic Thought and one of our first mathematical economists. By the way, Walras is spelled W-A-L-R-A-S, Walras, W-A-L-R-A-S. And then the other person, the second person, William Stanley Jevons, was before Alfred Marshall, and really a man of tremendous intelligence, a very seminal thinker, if you will. And he too formulated the law of decreasing marginal utility, and most likely would have taken English economics on a different path than Marshall. But unfortunately, we got stuck with Marshall, as the good things and the bad things. So what you might want to remember about William Stanley Jevons is he was 42 years old. He decided to take a bath, and he crawled into the bathtub and slipped and fell and broke his neck and died. So as a lesson to everybody, if you decide to take a bath or into a shower, be careful, you slip and break your neck, and you don't want that to happen. So, but Menger, he too was a really seminal thinker, a great, great mind. The set of ideas we're going to consider in the origin of money theory, well, I can just tell you that the origin of money theory is my favorite theory in all of economics. And there's several things we pick up with it. We learn about, at the beginning, something called evolutionary economics. We're going to assume that money doesn't exist. And there will be 7 steps that explain the evolution of a commodity money, and then money substitutes, and then something called a credit money, and then fiat money. Fiat money is the money we have today. So we have an understanding just from this theory how the economic good money evolved. We have a concept of money, and we have a way of looking at things that are, oh, I guess you um, see it as an alternative to English economics. It's the continental way of looking at things. And um, if you recall from your microeconomics in your textbook early on, it assumes that um, that one could measure value. And in other words, there are units of value called utiles. And so if you can count them, if you can distinguish them, you look for goods to exchange against that have equal value. So value in this sense is objective, and of course we all know this is not true. You cannot distill a unit of value out of goods and services. Value is subjective, and it is Carl Menger who gave us the subjective school of economic thought. Well, you'll see what I mean here in a few moments. But in any event, handout number 2 has just 4 pages to it. And most especially the actual theory is given to you on page 3 and page 4. And I want you all to have read this handout in preparation for the exam, and I will ask questions about the origin of money theory. Not difficult ones, but I want you to go through it, and I want you to be meticulous in learning it. So with the origin of money theory, and the formulation of his law of decreasing marginal utility, you can find that in Menger's book entitled Grundsätze, which is German for principles. And I think it's in the 4th part of the book that you can find the origin of money. And I'm not sure where the law of decreasing marginal utility is, but anyway, we think that modern economics begins with marginality, and so modern economics begins around 1870, 1871. You notice that on page 1, we have the 7 steps of the origin of money theory. And we find out really that money is a social institution which has evolved, which has come into being. It's not the product of design. No one designed it, no king, no queen, no dictator, no president, no Congress, no parliament invented money. And what we have here is really the near beginnings of something called evolutionary economics. Now, evolutionary economics is no longer the frontier in economic science, but maybe about 20 years ago it was, and stayed there for a long time. And so evolutionary economics is an important part of economics now. And game theory is part of evolutionary economics. So anyway, we want to explain the 7 steps. And the first step is primitive indirect exchange becomes an alternative to direct exchange. Now, direct and indirect exchange are 2 broad categories. And direct exchange is a name for barter, bartered exchange. And you know what that is. And indirect exchange makes use of a medium of exchange. And you'll get a better feel for that in a few moments. So if we go to page 2 of the handout, we see uppercase letter B, the case in which direct exchange is impossible. Well, let's develop this. And the first thing we want to do is engage in a barter transaction. And I assume that there is a student out there in the 78 or 79 amongst you who would transact something with me, exchange something for my watch. My watch is one of the first smartwatches. And it's an Android watch. And I think it's still valuable. It's kind of a collector's piece. But anyway, if I exchange this watch for maybe, let's say, a calculator, then following the Menger approach, it takes unequal valuations for exchange to occur. What are we saying? I would prefer the calculator to the watch, and the other person in the exchange transaction would prefer the watch to the to the calculator. So what we want to take note of is that I attach a different importance to the items than the other counterparty to the transaction. The valuations are unequal. We're not exchanging things of equal value, but really of unequal value. I prefer the calculator to the watch, and therefore I participate in exchange, and the other counterparty to the transaction prefers the watch to the calculator, and therefore he participates in the exchange transaction. And this is a case of barter. We all know what barter is, but notice we didn't measure utiles. We didn't assume utiles. And the English tradition does just that, and then they go on without telling you that it's an unreal assumption and doesn't have a reality. We cannot steal units of value from economic goods and services. So then we have three individuals, according to Menger, individual A, individual B, and individual C. And A has 2 units of good, what? To M, as in Mary. And individual B has 2 units of good N, as in Nancy. And individual C has 2 units of good O, as in Ohio. So the question is posed, will or is barter exchange, that is direct exchange, possible given the circumstances? And you get the sense that, oh boy, maybe it's not. Things are getting a little bit mucky, a little bit unclear. But the answer is yes, it's possible to barter, if you will, participate in direct exchange in this more complex example. What are we saying? Individual A can transact with B and with C. And individual A and B and C, they give up 1 unit of their initial endowment. So A transacts 1 unit of M with individual B for 1 unit of N, and with individual C for 1 unit of O. So in this barter sequence that I'm describing, individual A ends up with 1 unit of N and 1 unit of O by participating in direct exchange. And then B would transact 1 unit of N for M, and then 1 unit of N, as in Nancy, for O. So he would wind up with 1 unit of M, 1 unit of O, having given away his 2 units of N. And then the third person, individual C, has 2 units of O. He transacts 1 unit away to individual A, and then 1 unit of O to individual B. So after participating in barter, that is direct exchange, he now has 1 unit of M, as in Mary, and 1 unit of N, as in Nancy, having transacted the 2 units of O away to each of the other individuals. So even in this more complicated case, barter exchange is possible, but everyone, you get that feeling that, hey, in some set of circumstances, it may not be possible to barter. And indeed, if we go over to page 2 of the handout, and the handout, by the way, can be located on the Baruch College Blackboard, handout number 2. I'm not going to put it on the screen. I'm not going to share screen on this one because you do have access to the handout. Excuse me. So on page 2, uppercase letter B, you see the case in which direct exchange is impossible. And we have 3 individuals again, A, B, and C. And individual A is the holder of good P, but really desires good R, commodity R. Individual B is the holder of commodity Q, but desires only commodity P. And individual C is the holder of commodity R, but desires only commodity Q. So is direct exchange possible between any 2 individuals? Everybody, I almost choked today, so I'm having a rough time with my throat. So excuse me, please, for coughing. So individual A is quite willing to transact with individual C because A desires good R, and it's C that has good R. But C is not willing to transact with A. Why? Because he desires commodity Q, and A has only P to give up in exchange. Now, A could also transact with individual B, at least logically speaking, we think, but hold on. The truck up, so to speak, B is willing to transact with A because he wants commodity P and A has P. But A doesn't want to transact with B because B has commodity Q, and A certainly doesn't want commodity Q, he wants commodity R. So we have 2 more individuals to consider, and we will have exhausted all possibilities. The transaction between B and C. And what do we want to say here? C is quite willing to transact with B because B has commodity Q and C wants Q. But B is unwilling to transact with C, individual C. Why? Because B wants commodity P, A has commodity P, but C does not. C only has Q and B doesn't want Q. So everyone, it's as if we've come to an immovable obstacle. And what are we saying here? Does civilization just stop because of this? That, you know, we've assumed no money. We really assumed almost a caveman society. Money is not known. And barter exchange is certainly known, but not indirect exchange. So direct exchange is impossible given, take a look here now, given the valuations of the 3 participating individuals. This is voluntary exchange we're talking about, and you know, the valuations of the 3 individuals prevent direct exchange from occurring. So, everyone, we have to either accept this is a permanent state of affairs, and caveman society doesn't evolve and doesn't progress into the modern era, so to speak, Or is there a way out of this? Was there a solution to what I will call the caveman's dilemma? The caveman's dilemma is that he cannot exchange any further. And if he wants the goods in question, he's going to have to take them physically from the other individuals. So everyone, is there a solution here to the caveman's dilemma? And so let's assume that individual A exchanges with individual B. Okay. Now A really wants commodity R, and B wants commodity P. And when they exchange, if they are to exchange, A will have to transact P away. So B is satisfied. He gets the good he wants. But A is quite willing to take in his possession commodity Q, even though he wants good R. Notice that our three goods here in caveman society are either each good is either a consumer good or a producer's good. A consumer's good is a source of direct satisfaction. Now, for example, if you eat a candy bar, your sweet tooth does flip-flops. So what are we saying here? The individual A is quite willing to take on Q, even though he has no use for Q as either a consumer's good or as a producer's good. He really doesn't want it. But everyone, A drops out because he achieves his goal of good P. And this is one way to define equilibrium when no further action is necessary or required. There's a satisfaction of the individual, and he just drops out of the process. So A now has Q. He wants good R, and he will transact with individual C, who has R and wants Q. They transact with one another, and both parties walk away from having successfully participated in exchange. They get the goods that they ultimately want for their own consumption or production. A finally got a unit of R, and C a unit of Q. So what are we saying here? Q becomes a medium of exchange. It has utility as a consumer's good or as a producer's good, yes. But at least from the perspective of individual A, good Q is a, what do I want to say here? Good Q is not used in consumption or production, but as a medium of exchange. And everyone, this is a red letter day in human civilization, because heretofore in our caveman society, we had the existence only of consumer goods and producer goods. But now we see that good Q is a medium of exchange. So now we have three general types of economic goods. Number one, consumer's good. Number two, a producer's good. And number three, a medium of exchange. In this case, Q is a medium of exchange. So now, you guessed it, there are two other solutions to this caveman's dilemma. And we want to take note that, you guessed it, of course, good R and good P will be used as a medium of exchange in the other two solutions. So what I want you to do in preparation for this final midterm is to think of the two other solutions to the caveman's dilemma. And maybe I'll just ask as maybe a 5-point or 10-point question. Gee, we had the what we use Q as a medium of exchange, and everybody walked away happy. Direct exchange was impossible, but because we used a medium of exchange, everybody was able to walk away. They got the goods they wanted for their own consumption and/or production. So we have a indirect exchange, and how do we define indirect exchange? Well, if you go to uppercase letter D on page 2 of the handout number 2, we have this definition. Indirect exchange is distinguished from direct exchange according as a medium of exchange is interposed or not. Now, don't let the big word interpose scare you from learning what it means. It means used. That's another fancy word. It's a fancy word for the word used. So what we're really saying is indirect exchange is distinguished from direct, that is barter exchange, according as a medium of exchange is used or not. And in the solution to the caveman's dilemma there, we made use of Q as a medium of exchange. And don't you say we escaped the caveman's dilemma, and you can be pretty sure that civilization has evolved in many, many stages, and until we get to the present day, and civilization is what we think it to be. So it's not a fantasy of ours. So everyone, you got your, you might think, well, where is one exam question coming from here? In the origin of money theory, there are, with this case in which direct exchange is impossible, there are 3 solutions. And I have only worked through one, purposefully only one, with you. And so I want you to sit down and think it through. It's not rocket science. And it's kind of fun, actually. And see if you can deduce the 2 other solutions. So then people, before we go on to another step in the origin of money theory, remember that first step is primitive indirect exchange becomes an alternative to direct exchange. The use of Q as a medium of exchange. Well, it's indirect exchange is the solution to the caveman's dilemma, and it's an alternative, obviously, to direct exchange. So everyone, we're still on, what do we want to say here, page 2 of the handout. And now I want to digress just a little bit and talk about the necessary conditions for indirect exchange to occur. And here, everyone, you want to look at the necessary conditions for indirect exchange to occur on page 2, uppercase letter C. We have 4 conditions. And here they are. First of all, the valuations of the participants must be unequal. In other words, one prefers good A, well, good, let's say good P, and the other prefers good Q or good R. And so the value, the importance or significance one attaches to the different goods is different between the individuals. So value, what is value? It's not objective like the Marshallians start you out with in economics. Value is subjective. It is the importance or significance you attach to a good. And there you have it, Bob's your uncle. So in working through the solution using good Q as a medium of exchange, we saw in each instance of exchange that it was indirect, and that the valuations of the participants in exchange were unequal. One person preferred good Q, the other person's preferred good R or good P. So that's the first necessary condition. And whether you're talking about direct exchange or indirect exchange, the participants are what? They have unequal valuations. The second one is self-evident. There must be more than two individuals and more than two kinds of commodities in the market. There must be more than two individuals and more than two kinds of commodities in the market. So we have three individuals in uppercase letter B and three economic goods. And then I'm going to skip the third necessary condition for a moment and talk about the fourth. Indirect exchange must be beneficial to the exchanging participants. And what are we saying here? You get the good you want for your own consumption or production by participating in indirect exchange. There must be something in it for you to participate in indirect exchange. And what do we want to say? We're going to proceed as utilitarian philosophers here. I'm going to say to you that your self-interest is involved when you participate in exchange, okay? And you are selfish or self-interested. And everybody else is selfish or self-interested. And I don't mean selfish as a term of reproach. What I mean is that you are saying in the exchange process that I would like, I want, I desire, I yearn for, I have a yen for, blah, blah, blah. Good X, good Y, good Z, whatever. When you say I desire or I want, here you have an evaluation, and we all have valuations. And just by saying I want, I desire, I wish for, I would like, that's what we mean by selfish or self-interest. And so in the English world, as is true of most other cultures, the word self-interest or selfish becomes a term of reproach. And what I can remember as a kid, my mother was quite a cook. She would cook pies and she would put them on a windowsill. In the summertime, I would take the pies and cut out a slice and put it back. And I thought that I was getting away with something. And of course, she didn't let me get too far and said, "Oh, you're selfish." She meant it as a term of reproach. But I don't mean it that way. Those who participate in exchange are saying, I want, I would like. And they're expressing a valuation, a subjective valuation. So what do we want to say here? The English tradition, uses the word selfish as a term of reproach. Let me give you an example here. Suppose we're pre-coronavirus, And we see a great big school bus parked outside of the Armory on 25th Street. And there are only two people out there. There's this little old lady, she's 99 years old, she has two canes, and she wants to get on the bus. And what she has to do is, walk up some steps. That is, put her foot on the step of the bus and lift herself up, and two or three more steps, and she's on the bus. And then we have a teenager, 15 years old, a boy, and he wants to get on that bus first, no matter what. So what's he do? He takes the little old lady, grabs her by the scruff of the neck, and yanks her down from the first step of the bus and throws her into the gutter. And then he gets on the bus. Well, this is for many of us not acceptable. We say that young boy was selfish, and we mean it as a term of reproach. He shouldn't have done that. He could have hurt the other person. But with the English tradition, it seems as if only bad examples of self-interest or selfishness are conjured up. But let's take the case of this same pre-coronavirus. You're at school, and your parents or your girlfriend, boyfriend tell you to stop at a convenience store and get a loaf of bread for tonight's dinner. And when you go into the and buy the loaf of bread, you're saying, I want the bread. I would like, I yearn for, I desire all of that. And so don't you see, there's really no difference in the case of the selfish boy trying to get on the bus first and the person who buys a loaf of bread at a convenience store. When we say I want, I would like, I desire, and there's some other words as well, that's what we mean in the utilitarian sense, philosophical sense, that a person is self-interested or selfish. And people, everybody, in that sense, everyone is selfish, including your professor. And notice that I'm not using it as a term of reproach. I'm not using it to point out some action that I don't like. Whether you're engaged in a good or a bad case of self-interest or selfishness, well, everybody, when they say I want, I desire, I wish for, is self-interested or selfish. Now, let's see if we can think, let me see if I can convince you that you are selfish in the sense I mean, utilitarian sense, not in the term of reproach that is used in our culture. Let's assume we're, let's say it's tomorrow, July 25th, and we're the temperature is supposed to climb to 95 degrees. And suppose you're outside of the Newman Vertical Campus building, and you go to the intersection of 25th Street and Lexington Avenue. And you see a young girl, a new mother, coming down with a stroller. She controls the stroller, and she has triplets. She has 3 kids in the stroller. And it's something to see, of course. But then also coming down Lexington Avenue is one of those big New York City garbage trucks. Well, God forbid the example follows like so. One of the 3 kids gets out of the stroller, runs into the intersection, and you and I are on the corner of the intersection. And we have a choice. And what we're doing is setting up the case, setting up the conditions that we face. And if you and I decide to go out and save the child, we can do it. We can push the child away so that he isn't hit by the truck. But in so doing, we will lose our own lives, it is assumed. If you can construct all sorts of cases here, but let's accept the conditions which I specify. And so those of us on the corner, if we choose to save the toddler, well, we lose our own lives. So now what would you do? Would you remain on the corner like your professor would? Or would you rescue the child, but you would lose your own life? So, again, we're at a disadvantage because we don't have a classroom full of students. And you get a diversity of opinion here, but maybe a third of the class would agree to stay on the corner and not save the child. Maybe another third would say, well, I think I'll save the child, even though it would mean losing my life. And the other third wouldn't have an opinion at all. So there is this solution. And what we're saying is, no matter which of the solutions you opt for, you're saying, I want, I desire. If you say, I value or attach more significance to my own life than the child, you remain on the corner. If you go out and save the child, you prefer to save the life of the child rather than and lose your own. And then we won't even say anything about the third group. But still, don't you see, we are self-interested. And we say, I want to do this, whether it's save the child or not save the child. And the altruistic person, the person who goes out and saves the child, he too is being self-interested or selfish. What do I mean by that? Well, you're saying, I value the child more than my own life. I want to save the child. I desire, I wish for it, that type of thing. So even an altruistic person is a self-interested person. Okay, if you adopt the utilitarian concept. So there you go. Now let's change the case just a little bit more. Let's say that you are the person with the 3 kids in the stroller. And Dr. Henry and the rest of the class is on the corner. The truck is coming down, speeding, if you will. And your child jumps out into the intersection and can be saved, but only at the cost of life. What would you do? Would you, as a parent and others on the corner, would you go and rescue the child or not? Now, if we take a poll in the class, almost everybody raises their hands, they would save the child. And Dr. Henry decides to sit on the corner again. And why? Well, there are various positions one can take. And certainly understand the position of a parent saving the child. But everyone, if you save your child and you're a single parent and there are no relatives, the remaining 2 would become orphans. If you are married, you lose your life, your spouse will be left with the two children to bring up. It may be hard for him or her to do so. And most especially, the two children would not have a mother or a father, depends on who gets out there in the intersection and gets squished, as it were. So they are left fatherless or motherless. And then Dr. Henry has the position, well, terrible thing has happened. We want to avoid it at all costs. But I say to you, stay on the corner. You can have more children in the future. Have another child to replace the child you lost. And of course, everybody boos and hisses at that. But allow me to tell you two stories to make it very palatable. The first story, I have a wonderful Jewish friend, a lady, she's Australian. And one day she told me about her uncle and aunt. They were sent to the concentration camp at Auschwitz, I believe it was. And they had two children. And they were given the following choice. If they keep their own children, the children and the couple would perish. And if they give away their children to somebody, say, as old as me, and so say my wife as well, we're old, we too are going to perish in the concentration camp. We can't do as much work as a young person. And the children are a cost around our necks. It'd be a cost to, in other words, concentration camp doesn't want to spend the money to feed and take care of them. So the young couple, the uncle and the aunt, they have a terrible choice to make. And so they gave away their children. And the children and the older couple perished, but they survived, okay? Instead of a loss of 6 lives, there was a loss of 4 lives and 2 survived. The parents of the children, it was slave labor, yes, but they survived. So my good friend, I asked her, well, psychologically, how in the world did the uncle and aunt react to this state of affairs? And she said, tragically, because both the husband and the wife, that is the uncle and the aunt, were devastated by this, having to make this choice. And they migrated to the United States, but at parties or wherever, you would see each of them staring out into space. And everybody, they allowed their grief to overcome them and to overcome them the rest of their lives, so that their lives were, well, it was very sad to see this. They did not have additional children, but they could have, and they could have been the wonderful parents that I'm sure they wanted to be. So it's a real tragedy, and your heart goes out to them. But here, for them, for their happiness, after the fact, having more children would have been a good thing. And then now, let me tell you one that is a personal story that I was involved in. When I was doing my dissertation at the University of Pittsburgh, about anywhere from 5 to 8 students writing their PhD would meet usually in the morning and maybe at noontime to have a cup of coffee and to shoot the bull, so to speak, for 15 minutes. and they came from all parts of the university. And there was one young man, he was from Saudi Arabia, a true gentleman, very interesting to listen to talk with. And he was about finished with his dissertation, and all of a sudden, everyone, he didn't show up in the reading room, we called it. And it maybe, oh goodness, 8 or 9 months passed. And I thought something had happened. I didn't know what. And then one day, there he was back in the reading room. And of course, we talked. And he told me, well, just a heartbreaking story. They had had a little boy. He was, I think, 2 or 3 months. And he was put in a crib at night and then suffocated. This is called infant death syndrome, or SIDS. And my friend came back to Pittsburgh to the graduate school to finish his dissertation. His wife would not come with him. And both of them thought that they somehow were negligent and caused the death of their little boy. And they were just, heartbroken, stricken with grief. And, what do you say to someone who is in these circumstances? Well, first of all, we want to say that it has not been proven that parents cause SIDS in any way, infant death syndrome in any way. And the belief, and you understand how it evolves, how it comes about, that the parents were somehow negligent. I understand that, but they really weren't. And it's important to say that to them. And then he would clean. Was going to clean out his apartment, get his degree, and then go home. But I wanted to say something else that was meaningful to him. I said to him, in this old world of ours, at some time or another, most people will have something untoward happen to them. And it can, the result can be an outpouring of grief from the hearts of those affected. And this grief that people experience, one has to know how to handle it. It can destroy your life. It can take happiness from your life, and you unfortunately never let happiness back in. And so I said to my friend, I said, look, I know that you and your wife wanted to be really great parents. You want to be a great dad and a great mom, but we can't change what occurred. But you can do this. You can have another child and just act as the great parents you would have been to the first child. But you can be great parents to that second child. The second child can bring you oodles of happiness, and you will experience all that life has to offer as parents. So everybody, if you choose the way I have valued this case, I too am selfish. I wish for another child, if you will. And everybody who's altruistic or not altruistic is selfish, self-interested. Not as a term of reproach now, but in the utilitarian philosophy sense. So everyone, we have in uppercase letter C, indirect exchange must be beneficial to the exchanging participants. there must be something in it for you. You've got to say, I want, I desire, I wish. And so valuation, in the sense of attaching importance or significance, is part of what the mind does. It's part of what it means to be human. So you have subjective valuation in a big way in the Menger way of looking at things, the Austrian school way of looking at things. And valuation is subjective. You cannot measure it. There is no such thing as a U-time. Now, we've defined indirect exchange, and so we want to move on, except we haven't talked about the third point of as a necessary condition for indirect exchange to occur. And that is, there must be a difference in the marketability of goods. Marketability here means ease of buying, ease of selling, and what do we want to say here? If you go to, let's see what, if you go to the fourth page, which there's page 32 and 33 of the reading, we want to read the first full paragraph on page 32 of page 3. Now, all goods are not equally marketable. While there is, maybe I'll put this on the screen. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, goodness. I don't know if you can see it or not. But anyway, let's assume you can. And again, it's on page 3, first full paragraph. You can get the actual handout. Now, all goods are not equally marketable. While there is only a limited and occasional demand for certain goods, that for others is more general and constant. Consequently, those who bring goods of the first kind to the market in order to exchange them for goods that they need themselves have, as a rule, a smaller prospect of success than those who offer goods of the second kind. If, however, they exchange their relatively unmarketable goods for such as are more marketable, they will get a step nearer to their goal and may hope to reach it in a more sure and economically than if they had restricted themselves to direct exchange. So the probability of getting the goods you want for consumption or production increases when you participate in indirect exchange, even though indirect exchange, that is the use of a medium of exchange, is more complex in its description than direct exchange. So there must be something, if you will, in it for you. And what's the other benefit? You reduce your time and effort in the marketplace by proceeding through indirect exchange. If you have to find a good to barter away, if you have a good that you want to barter away, then you've got to find an individual who wants that good, who sees a utility in it, and then there's the, how many of the goods would he or she buy, that type of thing. So barter exchange, that is direct exchange, cannot be carried out to a significant extent in a market system. Our valuations get in the way. And so if God waves his hand and all of a sudden all money prices disappear from our memory, we're going to be in bad shape, because again, you cannot carry out barter on a large scale. It's just impossible. Now, so greater probability of success in getting the goods you want, and reduction of transaction costs, that is time and effort. Those are the benefits of indirect exchange. And don't you see, the fourth condition is met, but we also make use of marketability. Now, let me prove to you, this is one of these examples in which, you need the professor. Most of the time you don't need the professor if you read the materials yourself and understand them. But let's go back to our solution of the caveman's dilemma. We only did one. You've got to do the other two and be prepared for the final. But let's look at goods P, Q, and R. And we'll define marketability here as the ease of buying a good. We'll do the same with selling in a moment. But how many people were willing to buy good P? And the answer is individual B, just one. And then we'll go to good R. How many people were willing to buy good R? Again, just one. But then when we look at good Q, how many people were willing to buy good Q? Well, take a look there at the C wanted good Q, B had Q. But also A was willing to take possession of Q and use it as a medium of exchange. And eventually he got the good that he wanted for consumption or production. So we have individual C wanting to buy Q. And individual A was willing to buy Q. So the marketability of Q is 2. Now let's read the necessary condition for indirect exchange to occur. There must be a difference in the marketability of the goods. Certainly, Q has a greater marketability than either P or R. So there you have it. Marketability means the number of people who are willing to buy or willing to sell. Now let's do the selling exercise. Again, look at P, Q, and R. Who was willing to sell good P? How many were willing to sell good P? And the answer is one person, and that would be individual A. So, okay, and good R, who's willing to sell good R was individual C. But who was willing to sell good Q? Well, we had B for sure. And then, of course, A was willing to sell Q to individual C in exchange for R. So there you have 2 people who are willing to sell good Q in our first solution to the caveman's dilemma. So what are we saying? There must be a difference in the marketability of the goods. And because there is, we're going to be able to move pretty swiftly through the origin of money theory through step 4, at least, once we get step 2 out of the way. So everyone, we have a concept of direct exchange, barter. It's not so difficult. We have a concept of indirect exchange. We have the caveman's dilemma, in which we see our valuations getting in our way. We cannot get the goods we want by participating in direct exchange when you consider the case under uppercase letter B, page 2 of the handout. Okay, so, and then we have a solution to the caveman's dilemma, but so far as we have gone, we have these necessary conditions, and we understand them. They make sense. More so than the Marshallian way, I might add. And this is the Menger way, the Austrian school way, and you have unequal valuations make indirect exchange possible. They also make direct exchange possible. There must be more than two individuals and more than two kinds of commodities in the market to have an instance of indirect exchange. Because we are selfish, because we are self-interested, indirect exchange must be beneficial to the exchanging participants, to each counterparty. They're just unequal evaluations, of course. If you will, unequal benefits too. And then there must be a difference in the marketability of the goods. Now, be careful here. Do not confuse the demand for a good with marketability. We demand a good because it has a utility, a usefulness to us, an objective quality, if you will, that helps us do things. I have a watch, it helps me tell time. I have eyeglasses, it helps me read or see. And of course, both are in short supply, so you have scarcity there as well. What do we want to say here? In indirect exchange, we make use of a medium of exchange. And we had a primitive medium of exchange, Q, in our Caveman's dilemma solution. So let me see if I can stop the recording. We're going to have a concept of moneyed exchange that we're going to learn as well. But, let's see. I think I will terminate this particular lecture. This is lecture 10, put together on the 24th of July. Around, well, we're ending the lecture here around 9:45. And I'm not sure when I began, but this is a little bit of a long one, but I think you will find it very, very interesting. So I'm going to end it, and I'll probably be back for a second lecture tonight as well.